All right, I think we're going to go ahead and get started, get this thing off to a roll now. My name is Matthew Monk. I'm the grant writer here at the Guild. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to our first biannual Craft Studies Conference. I'd first like to welcome to the stage to give a little introduction and overview of what we're going to be doing this weekend. So I'm going to be introducing Michael Hatch. Mike is a maker and scholar. He's worked with molten glass for over 35 years and has run his studio gallery, Crucible Glassworks, in the Asheville area since 1998. He received a BA in Sociology and Anthropology from Virginia Commonwealth University, where he was first introduced to glassworking. He received an MA in Critical Craft Studies from Warren Wilson College and has since added independent researcher, curator, adjunct professor, and conference organizer, as well as other accolades to his resume. He has presented his grant-funded research through exhibitions, writing, conference presentations, and sound and video projects. His glasswork has been exhibited in galleries and museums throughout the country. Mike became a member of the Southern Highland Craft Guild in 2005 and has served on numerous committees, 2 terms on the board of trustees with 2 years as vice president, and he currently works as the Guild's archivist. So welcome to the podium, Mr. Mike Hatch, everybody.
How's everybody doing today? A little cool, rainy morning. Thanks everybody for coming out. We're going to have a really exciting weekend here. Just want to thank you for joining us at the Craft Making and Thinking Conference. We have assembled a great lineup of scholarly craftspeople and craft scholars who will hopefully change the way you think about craft, histories, and the future of craft. I hope you'll join us throughout the weekend as we explore what the study of craft can teach us and how craft can help us build communities. So, craft studies, we're looking at not just objects, not just makers. We're looking at the context and places in which they exist. We're looking at the stories that they tell and the stories that they don't tell, and search for the stories that are missing, and use craft as a way to analyze lots of different things besides just objects. And so when we're thinking about craft, right, it has so many different meanings, right? It can be sequins, it can be fine master craftspeople. And so we had in the MA class, in the MA program, we started, Lisa Jarrett started us with she rolled out a giant sheet of paper and she asked us to present 100 questions for craft, right? And as we said them, she scribbled them down and we had this big, long sheet that had 100 questions for craft. And one of those was, can craft save America? And I bring that up. There was a lot of good ones. But I bring that up because in the lobby here, in the Park Service little kiosk there, they do have a book by Glenn Adamson, Craft and American History. And there is a chapter in that book titled, Can Craft Save America? Which he was one of our guest instructors during that residency when we did that exercise, and he was so compelled by the list of 100 questions that he wanted to actually use that as the title for that book, but his publisher said no, and so it just became a chapter. And so I adapted this sort of thing too when I was teaching Appalachian craft history at Warren Wilson College. I simplified it a little bit and said, just what is craft? And began writing down all of their answers. So a few of those were, craft is everything. And then we have functional items, traditional, creativity, shared, community building, decorative. And then they started listing through different mediums that people work in. And oral histories, underdocumented, personal, engaged with the natural world. So that's just a few samples of this long list that we came up with of asking questions about craft and thinking through craft. And so that's kind of the point of this. We have a great mix of people talking about craft in a lot of different ways. And so we're going to begin today with a history of the people who laid the roots over 100 years ago that made Asheville blossom into the cultural destination that it is today. Our first speaker, Janet Wiseman, will speak about the pioneering women who were instrumental in reviving traditional crafts in southern Appalachia. Janet Wiseman is a seventh-generation Appalachian. She has spent years learning from her southern Appalachian elders and studying the craft, herbs, and musical traditions of western North Carolina. She began working for the Southern Highland Craft Guild in 1993 and also whittles, writes songs, and poetry. We look forward to... there she is. All right. And so just to get things going, we don't have a T-shirt cannon, but here you go.
Oh, it's so wonderful to see everybody out here this morning. And I want to say, Mike and Matt and everyone who worked so hard on this did an amazing job. And I can't help but think that the founding members would be so pleased to see that we are honoring them, and not just them, but crafts, and all kinds of different ways of thinking about crafts. And I wanted to tell you about, I thought I knew everything about the founders of the Guild, but I didn't really know anything about the actual inner workings until during the pandemic, when we weren't really supposed to be coming to work, but we couldn't stay away. And I decided, well, I don't really have anything to do. I'm going to read all these letters in the archives. And when I got in there and started reading those letters, often we don't show our true selves except in our correspondence. And I learned about these women in a way that made me just admire them, unbelievably admire them, but also to learn that they lived a very different life from people, other women during that era. And of course, I've got to start with Frances Goodrich. And a lot of people know things about Frances Goodrich. But what I want to tell you about her, first of all, is that she was a person who was loved. She was loved by people in the mountains. And one of the quotes by John Paris, who I highly admire as a writer, he was a writer for the Asheville Citizen, and he had a column called Roaming the Mountains. And he did a 3-part series on Frances Goodrich and the making of Allenstand. And he said no other outsider in the history of the mountains was as well loved as Frances Goodrich, that she was one of the most important women that ever come to the Southern Appalachians and did any work. Now, she was her dad was a Presbyterian minister, and she was the great-granddaughter of Noah Webster, who wrote the Webster's Dictionary. She was well-traveled, she was highly intelligent, and she didn't want a normal life as far as what women were doing at that time. The Civil War took out a lot of men, and there was a lot of women who, your choices were, if you weren't going to get married, you could maybe be a nurse or a teacher or a governess or something. And then when the missionary field opened up, it opened up this whole world of freedom for women. And Frances jumped on it. She came here in 1890 to East Asheville, and she worked for the Presbyterian Mission Board. And she had the opportunity to go out into the wilds of Madison County, and she jumped on it. She got out there, started 4 schools, all these women's groups, and helped start a hospital. And so she's out there, and many times people didn't accept. And I'm from here, and I can tell you, a lot of times people come in and they think, well, they're not too bright. You know, I know a lot more than they know, and I'm going to cram my theology down their throat. And they weren't accepted. You know, that wasn't the way to come around getting things done. But she wasn't like that. And so she came in, and she was embraced. They called her the Bishop of the Laurel. And so because she was embraced, the Angel family gave her a 40-year-old coverlet, a family heirloom. This is huge. When you don't have much yourself, and you're handing somebody something that your grandmother made because you admire them so much. It was the double bow knot coverlet, dyed with chestnut bark. And it was like a bell went off in her head. Look at these amazing crafts. Look at these things. I could help bring money into the mountains. Women who have money gives them a whole different set of independent skills when you've got your own money. And lots of times women didn't leave the farm for 7, 8 years. It was just family. You know, men had a trade society, and lots of interactions. Women, on the other hand, did not. And so she got looms in. She found people who had these old drafts, these weaving drafts, and she set up this whole, it was a whole new idea. And through it, she started Allenstan in an old drover's cabin on the Buncombe Turnpike. And that was the first craft shop in the United States, which we still have here at the Guild. And so with Frances, you know, I find that she was a person who brought people together. My studies of her is like, because with all these women that worked together to start the Guild, they were all very independent women, and they had very different focuses, and yet they were able to work together and make an umbrella organization, which is amazing in itself. And so we've got Frances, who's got the Allen stand, and then we have these other women that were also doing different paths coming in. We've got Clementine Douglas, and she grew up with she had a health problem, so she had private tutors. She was at home. She dreamed of adventures, reading these books of adventures. It was like, I'm going to get out of here, and I'm going to do something different. And so she went to school in New York City at a design school, and she went to a talk that Helen Dingman gave from Berea College, and talking about coming into the wilds of Kentucky. Eastern Kentucky, the Pine Mountain Settlement School, Catherine Pettit started that. She was a suffragist. These were women who had purpose, you know. And so Clementine heard that and she said, I want to get out there. Yeah, I want to go out to the coal fields of Eastern Kentucky. Even though I've got a handicap, you know, I'm going to do it. And she did. And so she came into Eastern Kentucky, and she worked learning how to spin and weave, and saw the need to work with people in that way. And she had her little mule named Preacher that she rode around on. And of course, now we can't forget Frances Goodrich's pony named Cherokee as well. I mean, you think these are made up stories, but it's actually true. And this whole region was a wilderness. You can't even imagine the difference of even 100 years ago as far as the amount of people and the absolute wilderness. And so Clementine decided when she was taking care of her aged mother, and so when she came to Asheville, she was going to start her own business, which she did, the spinning wheel, which is still out here on Hendersonville Highway. It's on the National Historic Register, and it was designed by William Dodge, who is given credit as the architect of what we call Old Asheville. The look of Asheville is attributed many times to William Dodge. And so Clementine came in, she started her spinning wheel, she was one of the founding members of the Guild, and she was an amazing woman. I read every one of her spidery letters, and I came to love her very much. When she described to her mother the drowning of a student at Pine Mountain Settlement School, and just the empathy that came across those pages, 80 years, 100 years later, I just said, this woman, I just want to know all I can know about her and what she did. So you've got Clementine, you've got Frances, and then you've got the Spitfire that comes in, Wilmer Stone Viner. And natural dyers have always, I'm sorry to say, Dee Dee, that she was known as Pretty Damn Quick, PDQ, because she had a really quick temper. And she was a firebrand, you know, this natural dyeing connection. But she was an orphan, and she'd grown up on a plantation outside of New Orleans, and her whole dream was to have her own place. You know, she went to Vassar, and she too got hooked into the suffragette thing. She went to Pine Mountain Settlement School, and she finally got her first home. And guess what it was? It was the mother of a home for boys. She was at the house for these boys that were orphaned, 15 to 18 boys. And you think, well, that's just somebody like in the dorm, a dorm mother that makes sure you're in your room at the right time. No, she was responsible for making sure these boys got fed. She was responsible for their clothing. And the thing that happened was those boys came to love her. Even in her old age, she got letters from those boys. And what she did was she found a way to feed them, and she found a way to clothe them. She went around and got donations of raw wool from the farmers in the area, and so sent it out to her friends, and they knitted all these sweaters and mittens and socks and toboggans and all these things. But the problem was what? Well, white clothes in the coal fields of Kentucky. And so the boys were known. It's like, well, that's one of those poor kids over at the house with his white sweater that's covered in coal. And so she felt, I don't want my boys to be ostracized in this way and to be obviously seen as poor. And so she decided, I'm going to learn how to dye these clothes. And my boys are going to look good, you know. And that's that Spitfire. You can just read it in there. She's like, no way, I'm not allowing this. So she learned how to dye. She found a woman in the neighborhood. She got pamphlets from the Library of Congress, and she did it. And she wrote a little book in honor of her mentor, Catherine Pettit. We still have it in the library. And one of the cool things about in that book when I was reading about her, and it says, the most wonderful day to dye is on a fall day when the sun's shining. And I can just see her out there. Okay, I don't want to dye today. It's raining. You know, I'm only dying on a sunny fall day. And so she had a dream of having her own home and having her own family, and she did get that. She married a titled Englishman, and she had a very beautiful home full of English antiques over in the Tryon area, started her own business over there, and had a son. She's one of the few founding members that did have children. Most of these women, it was their career. It was their business. It was their career. The other one who also had children was Dr. Mary Martin Sloop from up at the Crossmoor School, who started the weaving room. And her husband, Eustace, my family is from Crossmoor, some of them, and the Sloops were very well admired part of our community, and they were neighbors of ours, and they were accepted in the community as well. And the things that I heard from my family was, nobody ever worked harder than Miss Sloop. That woman worked when she was asleep. I mean, she worked when she was asleep, and she had children. And there's still the Crossmoor School for Children, which is now a nonprofit. It's still helping people. The weaving room is still making beautiful work. These things are still happening. You know, that's what's amazing. They're not something that happened 100 years ago and they're now dead. They were so important that they're still going on, you know. And so you think about those women, and you think about also Lucy Morgan, who started Penland School in 1923. She was the only person from the Appalachians. She was from Franklin, and her brother was a Episcopalian minister. And when she got up to Penland, and she too said, well, I'm going to try this whole thing with the weaving. You know, get these women weaving and get this money into the community again. And so the story goes, I remember Andrew Glasgow telling this story years ago. The story goes that she had them come and make the weavings, and then they got paid, and then the next day there was a line of 40 women at the door. Okay, show me a loom. I want to make some money too. And she knew it was going to be a success after that. And so, as you know, Penland School is still thriving, and Miss Lucy is still known as someone who made a big difference in the mountains. And then you think about John C. Campbell Folk School. And of course, Anna's going to talk about Alan Eaton. But John Campbell also worked for the Russell Sage Foundation. And Olive Dane came with him down here. And my readings on him and his Southern Highlanders book is like, very few people did more for people of Appalachians than John C. Campbell, as far as what he wrote back, because I think there was this thing of like, third world countries, Appalachia, they're savages. You know, what are we going to do with these people? They're not with us as far as industrial and all this stuff. What are we going to do? And so, you know, he writes back, and so does Alan Eaton as well. These people have a really talent for making things. You know, we need to help save their culture instead of trying to put it down. And so they went out and gathered songs with Cecil Sharp. He started the Southern Mountain Workers, in which she also was a big member of that. And all these people were members of that Southern Mountain Workers. When I was reading, I was like, bunch of communists. More socialist, I think, than that. They were just social activists. They really wanted to help people. I don't see them as having an agenda for themselves. I really don't. And that made me admire them even more. You know, they just wanted to help people. But so they went to Denmark, Olive Dane Campbell with Marguerite Butler. They went to go see like these amazing schools over there and these programs that they had done, because All over the world, people were losing the ability to make handcrafts because it was the Industrial Revolution. And just like now, why would I want to learn how to do something when I can just sit on my phone and go through the social media and become a zombie? You know, what's the difference for me? I'm entertained. I don't know what's going on. I'm fully unconscious to anything in the world. But who cares about making something? And that was happening on a different level then. And so they decided, well, how about an umbrella organization for the Guild? That's attributed to Olive Dame Campbell. She's the one that came up with the idea for that. And so they thought, we'll go in the Appalachians, we'll do what they've done in Denmark. We're going to set up these programs. But then they found that the personality of the average Appalachian person was highly independent and didn't want to be corralled into something. No, I don't want to be in a group. That's why I'm living out here in the middle of nowhere. You know? No, I don't want to be around here and be organized into something. And so they decided they'd have to do something a little different. And it's called the Brasstown Carvers. Teach them how to carve, let them do their own thing, you know? And that's what worked. And then they started the school, which you know is still amazing. John C. Campbell Folk School is still amazing. It's no less amazing now than it was when it started. And so there were other founding members, Berea College, Marymount School for Crafts, and that was started by the Phi Beta Phi sorority. Any more? Did I get them all? Berea, Marymount? Okay. So these amazing people who started the Guild, and I can't say enough about how wonderful they were, especially the women. Don't forget Clementine. I feel like she was forgotten, and I've got to mention Louise Pittman. She has not been put in as a founder, but she was there from the very beginning. She was a natural dyer. She was at John C. Campbell when they had the meeting watching the school, so she didn't get her name in all that. But she was, from the very beginning of the Guild to the time she passed in the 1970s, she was a big part of everything that happened. She was the executive director from 1951 to 1961. She was the one that got Parkway Crafts started. She's the one that helped get this whole thing, the ball rolling with the National Park Service. And I've got to make sure that Louise Pittman is remembered. I read her director's files, and I mean, it was just like her coming off the paper, these letters she'd send to people. Oh, well, you know, and it would be just like, I expected this to happen, but you didn't show up, you know, and you can just hear, you know, like, where were you? And so we've kind of lumped Louise in there with these gals. But I'm not going to keep running on because I know you want to hear about Alan Eaton and Anna, who is a scholar on a lot of things with the craft revival, and it's going to be quite interesting. But I'm so glad that y'all are here, and it's going to be a great weekend. And thank you for listening.